Welcome to Building, Protecting, and Leaving Your Nest Egg. This is our November Get Savvy, Grow Your Green Stuff webinar. It's part of a larger series for the 2024-2025 academic year. Hopefully you've been at one of our webinars before, but if you haven't, we use the chat a lot. So hopefully you can open up the chat and let me know if you can hear me, if you can type into that chat. There's a couple people also moderating the chat today in case you have any concerns or questions. We're going to keep everybody muted except who is talking. So hopefully that will make our recording a little bit better, a little bit more clean. My name is Andrea Pellegrini, and I run the Student Money Management Center for the entire University of Illinois system. And I'm joined today by my colleague, Alan Sorcher. Alan, do you want to talk a little bit about yourself and what you do at the Securities and Exchange Commission?
Sure, Andrea. And first of all, thank you for inviting me to participate into my office to be here doing this. We've done other presentations with you in the University of Illinois, and it's terrific to work with you. And so my title and role is I'm an assistant director in the SEC's Office of Investor Education and Advocacy. The SEC has lots of roles involving our financial markets and regulates brokers and oversees how companies go public, and is responsible for tracking down fraud. And my role in the Investor Education Office is to basically try to get information out to the investing public so that they can better understand investing, better understanding the frauds of investing, and better understanding the benefits of investing. So that's a quick thumbnail sketch of what I do.
Thank you, Alan. Oh, got too excited with the slide advance. If you want to also talk about our disclaimer here.
Okay, so these are very similar disclaimers, but at least as the SEC's, we have a disclaimer because we are a large government agency, and we want to be careful in terms of when we speak, so that it's clear what our purpose is and what we're speaking to. So with that, our disclaimer requires me to say that we are giving this information as a service to the investing public, students, and other kinds of audiences. This presentation is not a statement of official SEC policy. It's not a legal interpretation. And most importantly, I want to highlight this one, it's not investment advice. So I'm not here, and Andrew's not here either, to provide investment advice for you. What my role is to make you aware of the information that we have at the SEC and the things that we can make available to you to make you a more informed and savvy investor so that you can make good decisions for yourself in terms of your own investment advice or reaching out and talking to a financial professional. So in sum, my role is to make you more aware, informed, and also aware of the resources we have at the SEC that can help you.
Thank you, Alan. And again, we like to emphasize that any of our educational activities that we do with the Get Savvy series is intended to be educational and not advice. So it's sometimes a fine line to dance, but that's why we have these disclaimers. So collectively, the Get Savvy webinar team represents organizations across the state of Illinois, which rest on the ancestral lands of multiple Native nations, including the Peoria, Kaskaskia, Piankashaw, Wea, Miami, Mascoutin, Ottawa, Sauk, Meskwaki, Kickapoo, Potawatomi, Ojibwe, and Chickasha nations. And we have a responsibility to acknowledge these Native nations and work with them towards a more vibrant and inclusive society. And something we also like to do is poll our audience. So we have a poll. And again, things are moving around on me. We're going to kind of get an idea of who is joining us today. All right, so we have a lot of women on today, a lot of full-time employees, but we have several students. We have all kinds of age ranges represented today. All right, I'll leave it up a couple more seconds. And let's go ahead and end the poll. So I'm sharing the results just briefly so you can see who all is joining us today. We had over 200 people registered for this event, and I'm sure a lot of them are wanting the recording. So we will stop sharing. And if that box is still up, you can exit out of it. And it should, the next time we use a poll, I don't think we have any others on this particular webinar, but if we do, it should pop up for you again. All right, so some of the things that we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about defining asset planning and management and what that means. We're going to identify steps for building your nest egg. We're also going to discuss ways to protect your assets. And we're also going to talk about how to understand tools and some of the considerations for leaving your nest egg to loved ones. And we're also going to describe how to start conversations with loved ones about your wishes. So Alan's going to focus more on the building your nest egg pieces and a couple of the protecting your nest egg pieces. And I'm going to talk about the rest of the components of today's learning objectives. So we do like to use the chat. So hopefully you were able to open that up. I know some people have already responded and helped me troubleshoot our polling issue earlier. But can you tell us, what do you think the phrase building your nest egg means? Sometimes people have different interpretations for these kinds of phrases when it comes to how we use them in our everyday lives or when we're talking about financial planning. We have saving for retirement. Does it mean anything different to anyone else? All right, we got some agreement with the saving for retirement. Since we have a lot of things to cover, please put in the chat all the things you think it means. Oh, saving for families wiggle room. Yeah, a little emergency funding, vacations. All right. So there we go. Building your nest egg is an English idiom referring to savings you set aside for the future. Typically, it's something important like retirement, vacation, maybe your children's education. Um, and it's inspired by the practice of putting a real or artificial egg in a actual nest to inspire a chicken to lay her eggs there. So that's where that term comes from. I'm going to hand it over to Alan. Oh, no, I'm going to talk about this. I always like to try to give Alan more responsibility than he really wants. But let's talk about defining the role of asset planning and management. So in America, we tend to focus attention on infancy, early childhood, and adolescence the most. So we have a lot of developmental research around these areas of the entire life spectrum. Um, but it also makes having conversations about navigating adulthood and end of life situations more challenging because we don't really focus on that quite as much in general. We aren't as comfortable talking about some of the aspects of adulting, like, later adulthood or how to navigate certain aspects of middle adulthood. So we don't take the time to have kind of important conversations or set up plans for contingencies if things don't go how you would ideally want your life to go. So let's talk about life-wide planning. There are all these different components of financial planning that we participate in across our lives. Goal setting is a really important aspect of that life-wide financial planning, and we talk about it routinely in the Get Savvy series. It's something that is a core component of creating any type of financial plan or any type of other plan is goal setting. Retirement in particular is not something that a lot of young people focus on, which is typically our target population, but it is important so we can take advantage of time when we're young to grow or build our nest egg. Budgeting is one of those skills that's often associated with financial planning, and it helps us accomplish those goals that we set. Risk management includes insurance planning, and it's really focused on protecting your finances or your other resources or assets against potential risks. Investments obviously help us build wealth and save for the future. And we are really lucky to have Alan joining us to talk about how to leverage investments in building our nest egg, as well as some management strategies to protect it. So tax planning can be kind of complicated topic, especially with kind of all the changing laws as well as individual situations, which can fluctuate over time, but it is another important aspect of financial planning. And then estate planning in general helps your loved ones understand your wishes in case something happens to you. So there are a lot of different tools that I'm going to talk about today for leaving your nest egg through estate planning. Most of them are specific to the state of Illinois. So if you're in another state, you might gain some terminology that you can look for what is the appropriate law in your state that refers to some estate planning processes. And now I'm going to hand it over to Alan to talk about building your nest egg.
Okay, thanks, Andrea. So here's a quick outline of the things I'm going to touch on during my discussion of building your nest egg. So one, getting your credit under control. Two, how to start building wealth. That's the essence of it. The importance of starting to save and invest early. Okay, that's starting to save and invest early. And then also the importance of an emergency fund, how a diversified investment portfolio can help. And then lastly, really a focus on fraud, tips to avoid fraud, and then making you aware of the vulnerabilities that we all face as we get older and as we get into close to retirement years and after. And this also may be important because you may actually have relatives and other people who may be having getting older and having dementia, and you may have to step in and help. And so when I talk about that, most of the things that I'm going to be talking about are helpful to older people, but actually the steps that can help them are helpful to all of us, no matter what our age. So hopefully we'll see that when I get to that. Next slide. So when I said I was going to touch on getting your credit under control, it really is the stepping stone to starting to invest and save. And the first thing and the most important thing to do first is to take a look and see whether you have high interest debt or credit cards, those that charge 18% or more. And the best thing you could do was to pay those down as quickly as you can, obviously more than the minimum. And the reason why it's so important to pay those down quickly is because if you're paying 18% or higher on a credit card balance, that's actually better than you can do on an investment. The stock market some years pays 5%, some years is down 2%, some years up 30%. But if you're paying 18% or more on your credit card, that's actually a better return than you can get in the stock market. So the best thing to do would be to pay that off as quickly as you can. Okay, I mentioned an emergency fund. Having an emergency fund is really important. There have been surveys done by the Federal Reserve, which have, among the questions they've asked is, do you have $1,000 in savings to pay a car problem or a house repair? And more than 40% of Americans have answered that question in the negative, that they do not have $1,000 in savings for a home or car repair. Now, we did see, if many of you may remember, during the pandemic, people did start saving more. Americans traditionally have not been great at savings, but we got better during the pandemic. And the reason was, well, kind of obvious, we were all staying home. Now it's gone back to the old ways and people are saving a lot less. And so it is important to have an emergency fund. Well, how do you get an emergency fund? You got to start saving a little bit at a time, as much as you can do. Most experts recommend that you have an emergency fund of 3 to 6 months of living expenses. That may seem like a lot, and it may be, but your role is to just start saving as much as you can. And if it takes you several years to develop your emergency fund, that's okay. If you can put in a little at the beginning and more as you earn more, that's even better. One fantastic way to set up and to establish your emergency fund is to have an automatic deposit that goes from your checking account, which may be getting your salary deposits from work if you have a job, and goes into a savings account. And when it happens automatically like that, so it comes out at the beginning of the month before you have a chance to spend it, and so you're actually being incredibly conscientious in getting those payments over there because they're happening automatically, the money can really grow. So let's look at the next slide. So if you were able to save $75 a month, that may sound like a lot, but it's probably only a few Starbucks coffees. if you could save $75 a month, and here on our chart, we assumed a 7% annual return. That actually is a little bit higher than you get in a bank, but we assumed that. And so that is the premise. And so look what that $75 a month grows to. After 5 years, it's over $5,000. After 10 years, over 12, and after 20, again, assuming the 7% annual return, you're over $36,000. So a little bit of savings, if you're consistent with it, can really add up to some significant dollars. Next slide. I said that I was going to talk about the power of starting early. And that's particularly important to most of the people on this call, because most of you are students and have your whole work, life, and career ahead of you. So you have a lot of time. And so to take the example off this chart, if you're 25 or close to 25 and you said to Angie or me, well, I want to save for retirement. And we said, well, how much do you want to have? And you said, I'd like to save $500,000 by the time I'm 65. Well, you can do this on many kinds of calculators. The answer would be, if you want to save $500,000 starting at age 25, you have to save $209 a month. Now, if you said, well, I can't do it now, and you came back when you were 35, and you said, how much do I need to put in now to reach $500,000 by 65? Now you'd have to put in $441 a month. Why is that? Why is it so much more now? Well, the reason is that from age 25 to age 35, you had nothing in savings and your money wasn't growing. And so now you sort of have to make up for it. So again, if you were able to put a little bit in at 25 to start that money growing and to start the compounding, it makes it a lot easier down the line. So now at age 35, are you in bad shape because you can't save $500,000 by putting in $209 a month? No, you're not. The important thing would be to start saving it at 35, as much as you can put in, because the lesson here is the power of starting early. And as soon as you can get your money in there and growing, the more you're going to have when you hit retirement. Next slide. Okay, so when we talk about retirement, we're talking about really two important kinds of accounts that are out there, two important kinds of retirement accounts. One of them is the individual retirement account called the IRA or IRA. That's an account that you have to go to a financial institution or a bank to set up. And the other is an employer-sponsored retirement plan. The common name for that is 401k. There are similar programs for nonprofits and hospitals. And it's really, those are two avenues that the government has set up by law and regulation over the years. And these are the two key ways and main ways that most people save for retirement. Next slide. Okay, so when we talk about retirement and looking down at my life ahead of me, I'm really talking about two ways of looking at it: long-term savings and short-term savings. So if you're age 25 now and you're talking about saving for retirement, you might think that's kind of silly, but the best time to start investing for retirement is now. If you're looking down and you say, you know what, I can retire in 2050, then your portfolio is going to be mostly in cash, as you can see here, a little bit in bonds, and I misspoke on that, mostly in stocks, a little bit in bonds, and a tiny bit in cash. And that's because since you have a long road ahead of you, you can afford to take on the risk that comes with investing in the stock market. Now, contrast that with the shorter term goals. So this could be me, somebody who might be thinking of retiring in 2025 or close to it. That means I don't have a lot of time to absorb the risks of the stock market. And so my portfolio would be much more conservative because my time horizon is shorter. And so I would have a little less than half in stocks, a little less than half in bonds, and more in cash. And so when you compare this portfolio to yours, you can see much more conservative, much less benefit to the of stock investing, more conservative, but less risk. Next slide. Okay, so now we have our stock allocation, and we're going to put a diversification on top of our allocation to sort of further spread the risk around and make our portfolio even stronger to absorb the ups and downs of the markets. So here we're showing that you've taken your stock portion and you've further diversified that by investing that either through mutual funds or individual companies in the different sectors of the US economy. So you can see that the stock portion is invested in the financial sector, which are banks, consumer goods, of course, everyone knows the tech sector, healthcare, and industrial sector. Now, the benefit of diversification is if the tech sector were to take a hit, I mean, we all know the tech sector has been riding high for many, many years, but if the tech sector would take a hit, hopefully, because the way we've structured this through diversification and allocation, your portfolio would do okay because it's going to hopefully get the benefits of the other sectors, which may be going up even though the tech sector is taking a hit. Okay. So I've talked about the risks of investing. And of course, the risks of investing are something you just have to accept if you're going to invest. And the ways to deal with that, as we just looked at, are through asset allocation and diversification. But this chart really shows sort of the main reason that the stock market can be risky. And so we're looking at the market between 1926 and 2019. And I'm going to ask, and you can put this in the chat box if you wish, what's the main observation you see here when we look at this long period of time on stock market performance of large stocks? Anybody want to put anything in the chat box as to what the most obvious observation is? Do we have Andrea, any takers on that?
No takers yet. Oh, we see now mostly positive returns.
Super, excellent. So that is the most obvious observation, and hopefully everyone sees that. So it's the most obvious observation, but what's the significance of that? Well, the significance is that yes, the market does have down years, as you can see, but the up years are far more than the down years. And so over the long period of time, the stock market is up much, much more than it is down. And that's what you have to remember when you're looking at the market and how it's done. There are going to be periods when the market goes down, but you have to be patient and wait for it to return. So many of you may see the period a little bit to the right of 2006. In 2008, 7, 8, and 9, we had a stock market crash that was tied to the housing market. Many people saw their money drop by 40%, and they pulled their money out of the market. Well, what they missed over the next many years, you can see here from 2006 to 2019, was that the market, it was a great bull market. One little blip there in 2018, but other than that, it was a great bull market. So you have to be patient and you have to have a long-term view. Okay, another important risk to be aware of is what we like to call the FOMO, the fear of missing out. What does this mean and when does it happen? You may remember during the pandemic, there was a period when lots of people, particularly college-age kids and people of similar age, were investing in the market, many of them through apps on their phone, and they were investing through meme stocks and other stocks. GameStop was sort of the big one. It was lots of volatility because lots of trading. Many people saw this and said, hey, I'd like to get in on that too. And they did, but they did when the FOMO took over. And they got in, but they got in when the mania was almost over. And so they got in just as the market was starting to collapse. The market collapsed and they lost their money or much of it. And so what they did was they bought high and sold low, right? As an investor in the stock market, what we're trying to do is buy low and sell high. Buy low when maybe other people aren't buying it and you see some benefit to it, and sell high when you've had a good run on the stock and a good run of profits. Okay, another way to think about risk is about what kind of risk goes with certain different kinds of investments. And so here we see that you have cash in the lower left corner. When you put money in the bank, you're not getting a lot of interest. It's a little bit better today because the Federal Reserve had been raising interest rates for some time to fight inflation. So you don't get a lot of interest, but you get a very safe investment. It's not guaranteed, but your money in a bank is insured by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, the FDIC. So if the bank goes belly up, the FDIC comes in and makes the depositors whole. In the middle, in terms of the return and risk, are bonds. Bonds pay a little bit more interest than banks do, and they have a little bit more risk. So a bond's risk could be if the bond was issued by a city, like let's just take Detroit, for example, and the city goes bankrupt, then if you are a bondholder of the bank, you get in line with all the other creditors to see how much you're going to get paid and what was owed to you. And then last, in the top right corner, we have stocks which have historically been the highest paying performer. On average, the stocks have returned between 7 and 9% a year. That's on average, meaning that some years it could be 30, some years it could be -2. On average, it's been between 7 and 9%, maybe now a little bit higher than that because we've had such good returns the past couple of years. But with stocks, there are risks. And so you have to understand that a investment that offers the potential of high risk, of high reward, also offers, that goes along with that, the potential of a higher risk. Andrea, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize we had Alan touch on some really important pieces of investing, but investing is complicated. And so we're going to do a 2-part series in February around investing as part of the Get Savvy, Grow Your Green Stuff webinar series. So we're going to be talking more about the wealth building basics on February 6th. And we're going to be talking about more of the risks and rewards and more advanced kind of concepts that go with investing and wealth building on February 20th. So hopefully you can join us for that. And then I believe you get to talk about protecting your nest egg a little bit, Alan.
Okay. So protecting your nest egg is really important. And so I want to ask a couple of questions first. Again, you can answer this to yourself, you can answer in the chat box, or you can not answer it. So here are some questions to think about. Has anyone ever been approached to invest in something they thought was a scam? 2, has anyone invested in something that was a scam where they lost money? What did you do? Did you report the scam, and who'd you report it to? How do you identify a scam? Do you know of any red flags of fraud? And then why are red flags important? So we're going to talk about red flags, but here's the reason that red flags are important. If you were sitting down with somebody, an investment professional that had been recommended to you by a close friend or relative, and the person did something that was kind of a little bit questionable, are you knowledgeable enough to say, hey, I think that's kind of tricky and not legitimate, to sort of identify it and say, wait a second, let me get back to you. And so if you're able to do that, that would be really good. If you're not able to do that and you gave your investment or nest egg to the investment professional who was a little bit questionable, you may lose your whole investment. And so here are some of the other things to think about. Anyone who is selling you or telling you they're going to sell or buy for you investments or securities has to be registered and licensed. So if someone is not registered or licensed, that is a red flag. Now, how do you know if someone is registered or licensed? We actually have a tool on our website, investor.gov, that allows you to put in names to see if they're registered as a licensed investment professional. That same tool can also tell you if the person has any red flags in their background. For instance, would it be a red flag if you see that they filed for bankruptcy? Yeah, I think that's a red flag, because would you want somebody managing your money that looks like couldn't manage theirs? Another of the red flags that we see is people saying, hey, if you invest with me, I can guarantee you high returns with little or no risk. Now think about some of the topics I've covered on the earlier slides, where I said that all investments have risk, that risk and return are related. So something that offers a potential of a high return also has a possibility of high risk. And then one other thing I want to mention is we often see in scams, people who are the scam artists putting pressure on the potential investor to buy. You know, you got to make a decision today. I have to know in an hour. We see that come up in lots of cases that we bring. And think about it. Would there be really any reason why you should feel pressured to buy quickly? And we see that legitimate investment professionals just want the opposite. They want the investor to take their time, to go home and talk to their spouse or partner, or to talk to their accountant, and to make sure they want to invest in it, because investments can be risky. So someone putting pressure on you to make a decision quickly is a red flag that it may be something amiss or a fraud. Next slide. It's really important to monitor your accounts. So I don't mean, watch them every second, but have a certain period of regularity, whether it's once a month or once a quarter, to check not only your bank accounts, but your investment accounts. And the reasons to do that are several. One, you want to make sure that there's nothing fraudulent that happened in your account. Has there been a withdrawal from the account that you didn't authorize? If that's the case, you need to get in touch with the firm or the bank or the brokerage firm and let them know that. Another reason may be that you want to just see how your investments are doing. What we've seen over the years is, as the stock market has done really well, many people's accounts get out of balance, because since the stock market has done so well, you may actually have way too much of your portfolio invested in the stock market, which could make it a riskier portfolio for you. So it's important to check and see how the investments have done, and whether you need to rebalance them to take some of the risk out. Another thing to check on is what fees are you paying? All investments have fees, so that you're paying them in some way. It's important that you know what you're paying and what you're getting for that, and to question it and understand that. And then, of course, like all accounts online, it's always important to keep strong passwords, multi-factor authentication if you can. Okay, I said when I started that I was going to touch on sort of the end of your career when you get older, or when your loved ones have some kind of diminished capacity. And I said it's also important not only for older people, but for all of us, no matter what our age. And because I look at it as basically, as I'll talk about, getting our financial house in order. Now, as you get older, it's certainly, whether it's a parent or you getting older, it's really important to have someone that you bring in and talk to explain to them what your financial portfolio consists of. Secondly, it's really important to organize your important documents and keep them up to date, and to make a list of the important account information. Who's the contact person? Who's the financial professional? What are the policy numbers of the accounts? And where this information is all kept. Next slide. Okay, this is, I said, something that all of us would benefit from doing this, whether we're 35, 45, or 65, and that is to organize your important documents. That means your bank and broker statements, mortgage if you have one, insurance policies and who are the beneficiaries, again, if you have one. For people who are getting Social Security, they should have the papers for that. If they have a pension, they're lucky, and they should pull that information together. And of course, as I said, the contact information for financial professionals and also medical professionals. And so it's really important to do this. I've seen situations where as something happened to a loved one, whether it's dementia or someone passed away, and the family had no idea where all the assets were. They didn't know if there were any insurance policies. And some of this stuff, if you don't have it in a place can be very difficult tracking down. Here's one of the most important things you can do, and that's add a trusted contact. Well, what does that mean? A trusted contact is a person your brokerage firm will contact under certain circumstances if you've given them the ability to do this. And here's what they'll do. Again, if you've given them the ability and you've added a trusted contact to your account. If your broker believes your account may be exposed to possible financial exploitation or fraud, if your broker is having trouble reaching you, if they suspect you are sick or suffering from diminished capacity, they will contact your trusted contact that you gave them. Now, naming someone as a trusted contact does not give that person the authority to act on your behalf. or execute transactions or engage in any activity in your account. So you're not giving them authority by naming a trusted contact that they can do whatever they want. It's a limited thing. By adding a trusted contact to your brokerage account, you're giving your broker the authority to contact that person so that they can then try to reach out to you to see what's going on with you. So it's a really important thing to do. It can really stop a lot of frauds that have been started, or somebody who's being taken advantage by someone. Next slide. And again, involving someone you trust, providing that person with an overview of your finances, having a duplicate statement sent to the trusted person, having the person join you on visits to a financial professional, designating the trusted person as your power of attorney. These are all things that you should consider, again, as you get older or as your parents get older. Again, there are different levels of how much involvement you're bringing them into your financial situation, how comfortable you are with that. It may be that you're just a little bit comfortable, and again, just providing them with an overview of your finances, or at the other end, it may be that you totally trust them and you're giving them the power of attorney if something should happen to you.
All right. Thank you, Alan. I think it's really important that you involve someone you trust because things happen throughout our lives. So I'm going to be talking about some of the tools and considerations for leaving your nest egg and the processes involved with estate planning. So if you aren't familiar with the term estate planning, it is the preparation of tasks that serve to manage an individual's asset base in the event of their incapacitation or death. So because this tends to happen more when we're in older uh, part of our lives, we're in later adulthood, we don't talk about it as much, when we're in our 20s, but it's pretty important to have a plan or at least understand the terminology because it's likely you'll help somebody else that you love through this process. So if you're in Illinois, because I'm in Illinois, we're talking about students that are in Illinois and staff and faculty and other stakeholders that we like to provide services to. Without a will in Illinois, your personal property, this is your things like your car, your favorite chair, all kinds of your personal things, bank accounts, and investments and cash has to be distributed in accordance with state law. So if you die with a spouse, the spouse gets half, and any children get to split the remaining half. If you die in Illinois as a resident and have no spouse or children, then the property goes to the next closest surviving relatives. This could be parents, adult siblings, nieces and nephews, or cousins. It kind of depends on your state law, but in Illinois, that's kind of how it works. Without a power of attorney, which we'll talk about more in depth in the next couple slides, a court proceeding decides who will be power of attorney if you're incapacitated. This could kind of be a challenging situation for healthcare power of attorney, and we'll talk about the different types of power of attorney. But would you want a court-appointed guardian if you're in a coma, or would you prefer that someone that knows you and your wishes is in charge of your healthcare? So those are things that I want you to think about as we talk through these tools. So we have life insurance, power of attorney, transfers, wills, probate and affidavit, and funeral planning. These are some things that we're going to be talking about. These are tools and a couple considerations that can be done while you're still alive. I want to note that this is just an overview, and if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box and we'll try to answer it before you leave today. But remember that every state has different laws and we're not lawyers. Well, I'm not a lawyer. Alan is a lawyer, but we're not providing financial advice or estate planning advice. So we're kind of limited on what we know that might be applicable to your situation and what we can actually talk to you about from an educational perspective. So life insurance is a type of insurance that pays out to a beneficiary when you die. And there are a couple different types of life insurance that I want to talk about. So whole life insurance is as long as the premiums are paid, this insurance will follow you for your whole life. So it's sometimes called permanent insurance or permanent life insurance. You pay premiums that typically stay the same during the entire life of the policy. So whenever you started this policy, the premiums that you were quoted will be the same throughout the policy. So basically until you pass away. The older you are when you start this type of policy, the higher the premium. And um, premiums are higher and associated with a savings account or an investment account that may lose money over time. So there's a specific type of whole life insurance called variable life insurance that one of our previous students did an article about that you can learn more about how this works in comparison to both whole regular life insurance and term life insurance. So, term life insurance is for a specific period of time. So, until you're 60, or maybe it's only for 10 years. And these types of policies are not designed to last until you die, they are designed to last for the period in which you need them. So, for example, let's say you own a house, so you buy life insurance in case something happens where you die before the mortgage is paid off. This way, if something does happen to you within that, let's say, 30-year period, that's a typical term for a mortgage, then your life insurance policy will help pay the mortgage and any fees off, or for selling it. And if nothing happens during that time, you're fine during that whole 30-year period. Um, you won't need an insurance benefit after the 30-year period because essentially your mortgage is going to be paid off. And there are different reasons why you might want a term life insurance or whole life insurance. Typically, term life is a lower cost overall, and you can have other investment options or savings options that might provide a better value than whole life. But every situation is different, so it's best that you read that fine print, as we like to say, on comparing your options. So you can learn more about insurance specifically. We have ways you can watch, listen, or read about different things related to life insurance and insurance in general. So we're putting that in chat. Thank you, Richard. So I said I'd talk about power of attorney. Alan talked about trusted contacts. So with power of attorney, there's two types in Illinois that I really want to talk about. Power of attorney is where you designate a person to make decisions on your behalf in the event of incapacitation. However, if you die, this authority expires. A lot of people assume whoever's power of attorney will also deal with post life processes. That is not the case. The authority goes away once the person dies. So, with healthcare, for instance, you may be temporarily unable to answer a doctor's questions or make decisions, especially if you're heavily sedated or unconscious. We talked about the coma earlier. And it doesn't have to be a permanent situation, but you definitely need to talk about what your wishes are with your designated power of attorney before it's needed to make sure that they are up for that responsibility too. So for example, you might be in a situation where um your family member has told everyone what their wishes are, but they didn't say who was power of attorney until, they go into surgery and they're like, "Oh yeah, you're power of attorney," and the person that is told their power of attorney isn't comfortable making that decision. They're too stressed out about the surgery. It's best to have conversations ahead of time about that. So, power of attorney of healthcare allows someone to make decisions on your healthcare. Power of attorney for property or financial power of attorney allows financial decision making and management. This can be like paying bills, selling assets. And in Illinois, either of these power of attorneys, well, healthcare power of attorney must be signed by two witnesses to be valid. So you could change it every single day as long as you had two witnesses to sign it. With property, it must be notarized to be valid in Illinois. Um, and it can be done at any time, but most people wait until there's a serious medical or personal issue. And once it's implemented, it becomes effective immediately. You can be in a situation where you make someone a power of attorney just to sign a financial document. So, like for an hour for that one specific purpose, and then it expires. So, it's a pretty flexible kind of tool for you to use. All right, so transfers are a common way for an asset like a car or a bank account to be given to a designated person immediately after they die. So um, these different terms, payable on death, transfer on death, beneficiary designations, they're sometimes used interchangeably. So just keep that in mind. Organizations may differ in how they describe transfers, but essentially, they're all tools to transfer ownership of property or financial assets to someone else when you die. So just keep this in mind as an option for telling your family or your friends or your loved ones how you want your assets to be distributed. All right, so we talked about a will earlier, and I didn't necessarily do a great job of explaining what that was, but it is a legal declaration of a person's wishes regarding the disposal of his or her property or estate after death. Within Illinois, it has to be a written instrument, and it can be legally executed by a person to distribute assets of an estate after someone's death. All right, so a will can help you specify your last wishes and appoint someone to carry them out. It can be used to transfer assets to beneficiaries after your death, but it's not the only tool. It can also help you name guardians for minor children or even pets if you have pets. This is very important if you have young children that you name who is going to be the guardian. In Illinois, only self-proving or testamentary wills are valid. No oral wills are legally valid. So what that means is it has to be written and it has to be signed by at least two witnesses. Um, no audio or video recordings are actually legally valid. So keep that in mind when it comes to your will preparation. All right, so how do I make a will? You have several options. You can hire an attorney. This might be really important for complicated situations. They will know your wishes. They'll store it for you. It can also be helpful to have someone that knows your wishes that your family can talk to while they're grieving, because it's very challenging to navigate estate planning and estate distribution during that grieving process. You can also use online software or apps that can this can be an easy kind of fast way to do it and cheaper sometimes, but it's not always. So it can be more simple to more comprehensive depending on which tool you're using, and there's tons of tools out there that you can use. So um, we also put some resources in the chat on how to make a will in case you're interested in looking into those options. So to summarize wills, you can create a will electronically or with an attorney. You want to have it signed by at least two witnesses in Illinois. If you're in another state, Illinois state law is not going to apply. You don't have to have it notarized in Illinois, but it might not be a bad idea to get it notarized because the witnesses need to be unbiased. So you can't have someone who's listed in the will be one of your witnesses. Most financial institutions have a notary on staff, so that could be a good place to go get it notarized, or even a power of attorney notarized if that is something that you're looking into using or setting up. And then again, we can't stress enough, make sure to tell your loved ones where your will is located, maybe even make a couple updated copies to put in different places. And you also want to update it for life transitions. If you move, if you have a child, if you adopt a dog, all of those things are life transitions that you want to update your will for. You don't want to be in a situation where maybe you made a will 20 years ago, but you've had 3 kids since then, and because you didn't update your will for 20 years, your youngest child doesn't end up on your will when you die. So again, since we've spoken to people, I know there's different people from different states on, and a lot of our students move out of Illinois. When you graduate, updating your will when you move is a really good way to make sure your will is valid in a new state, since again, state laws differ a lot. All right, so what happens when someone dies when it comes to their property and finances? Their estate has to be settled. So this means that all their property, including cash accounts, house, cars, boats, etc., are collected. Um, their debts and any taxes are going to be paid out of the value of the estate. So you might have to sell some of those assets to pay off the debts. Then whatever's left over is distributed based on a valid will or state law. So in Illinois, there are two primary ways to settle an estate: affidavits and probate. And there are legal obligations and procedures that must be followed with each of these when someone dies. No matter what path someone has access to, debts must be paid, taxes must be paid, property and assets must be divided as the person who died intended or by state law, and having a will or other legal document like transfer of death completed helps people know what the deceased intended. So those different paths that I said you can take depends on your state laws, how much your assets add up to, and what the deceased has chosen to do with legal documents before they die. And if there are any dependent children that need to be cared for, that's also a consideration. So and you can use a small estate affidavit process if you have estates with total assets less than $100,000, and it will summarize the estate and the distribution. It must be notarized, and it's typically coupled with a death certificate. When you go to access any of the assets, especially investment accounts, they're going to require the affidavit and death certificate, and they may also require you to complete additional documentation if you use the affidavit process. With probate, you might have a situation where, with limited supervision, the judge reviews and approves all the final accounting that has to be filed by the estate administrator. And if it's a full supervision probate situation, the judge administers the estate. And this is fairly rare, but letters of office are issued in both cases for probate to indicate a legal representative of the estate. So there are certain ways that you can refer to yourself when you are going through the affidavit or probate process as either the legal representative or the personal representative of the deceased. All right. So, did you know that cryptocurrency is recognized legally in Illinois as an asset? So, it could be included in an estate. If, let's say, depending on how your crypto assets are held, it could be really difficult or impossible for your loved ones to gain access to those assets, especially if you did not share your passwords with them, or if you use a cold wallet and didn't tell anyone where it's placed or how to access it. It could be one of those assets that never make it into an estate. So for joint owned assets or businesses, those typically don't make it into the estate process. Anything where a beneficiary has been named typically doesn't end up in the estate process. But those are things to keep in mind when it comes to settling an estate. I know we're running a little bit behind, but I'm going to try to wrap up these next few slides in the next 5 minutes. So a couple things I do want to talk about is planning for protections for our loved ones and conversations to have with our loved ones. So funerals can be kind of costly. They can vary in size and scope and details, and it might feel a little bit morbid to talk about, but it's an important thing to think about and communicate about when creating your estate plan or talking about financial planning. So my brother actually died in 2022 and he was only 33 years old. And the only things we really had as a guide for his wishes was that he had signed up for as an organ donor, and he had made offhanded comments about what he wanted when he died as a child. So that's literally all we had to work with because he did not have a will. He had not really communicated anything. The nonprofit called our mom the same day that he passed away, and immediately after that happened immediately after I had called funeral homes to figure out how to organize the care of his remains. So, if the nonprofit hadn't been able to contact us so quickly, we could have proceeded with cremating him before knowing he was an organ donor. So, please, please talk to your loved ones about your wishes and what you want to have happen because it's a lot harder when they're grieving to have them make those decisions without you around. Some other things that I think it's important for you to think about. What are your goals with an estate plan? What tools do you want or need to use depending on what your assets are? Do you have a plan for social media or passwords in general? Do you have a plan for end of life care or what your wishes are? That can also change over time depending on your values. Do you have guardianship set up for your children or your pets? Often do you think you're going to reevaluate? It's not something that we love to think about all the time, but it's important to regularly check in, maybe every time there's a major life update, or maybe every 5 years. It's personal, so whatever works for you. And you might also want to think about what electronic assets you have and what you want to plan for their distribution, or how they're getting handled. Since this is something that's difficult to talk about, we do want to mention some things that you can do. So you can use a story of a family member, a loved one, or a friend, or use examples of celebrities. We put some examples of celebrities in the chat for you to reference if you want to use that. And you might use movies or books or websites to help. You might consider writing yourself a letter first. You might practice the conversation with a friend. And it's important to remember it's not going to happen once and it's a one and done situation. It's a series of conversations that may need to happen throughout your life. The Conversation Project is a free toolkit that can be used to have difficult conversations about end of life care and leaving your nest egg. So, to summarize, we just want to remind you that in order to start building your nest egg, you need to pay down high interest debt first, establish an emergency fund, and learn about saving and investing in order to start growing your nest egg, which it's ideal to start early. And if you automate your savings behaviors, that makes it a lot easier to reach your goals. But it's also important to watch for fees and fraud. And when it comes to leaving your nest egg to the next generation, you'll want to keep documents organized, identify trusted contacts, and communicate your wishes with others. So thank you for joining us today. We have this post-webinar survey. We'll put that in the chat, hopefully. We also have our next webinar on December 5th called Mastering the Consumer Credit Game, and it will be at noon Central Time, which you can register for. And this recording, once it's captioned and appropriately placed on YouTube, you can check it out there. We will also email it to anyone that registered for today's event. And if you want to stay in contact with the Get Savvy, Grow Your Green Stuff webinar series collaborators, there's a bunch of us. So thank you for joining us today. I know that there were some chat questions. I know that our slide link was a little bit off earlier today, so I'll double check that before we send it out again. And then I think that was the only big one I saw. I know when we were talking about investing, Alan, when you were talking about investing, we were talking kind of about higher level investment concepts, which I think it's why it's important to continue learning about investing, because it's a challenging thing for us to try to fit so much information in an hour. And feel free to log off if you need to. We will stick around for questions if you think of them and put them in the chat. But we'll also send the webinar recording to anyone that's registered. Richard, did you get any questions that we weren't able to address?
No, I don't think there was any specific question that was addressed to me. And other groups ones, I think you responded to them.
Okay, excellent. Alan, did you get any private messages that you could see?
I didn't think I did. I think they were addressed to everybody.
Okay. And I will double check there weren't any Q&A things. All right, and there were no Q&A things. So, all right, we have
There's a question now.
Okay, go ahead and read it out.
Is in terms of flexibility, my partner and I were talking about whether buying a house would be good if we wanted to move quickly to Europe with his family. Would you say that equity is worth it?
So that is more of a financial planner specific question. And with real estate in general, so to make this more applicable to everyone, most Americans hold a lot of equity in their home when they've purchased a residence. That doesn't make it an investment. It makes it an asset where you can sell that asset to get equity, to get funds. There's a lot of opinions about whether you should consider that asset as an investment and what the trade-offs are. And because real estate values vary so much nationally, it's hard to provide concrete education on whether that particular question can even be answered. So I would say find a financial professional that can help you make a plan that works where you are and can help you and your partner kind of make plans together on what would be best. Hopefully that helps. All right, we got another question that might be too advanced or too specific to answer, but maybe Alan, you have some insights on what education you can provide for this. How does a self-managed exchange traded fund or ETF return rates compared to mutual fund management in terms of return?
Okay, so to the extent I follow that, so if you have an ETF, an exchange traded fund, and you also have a mutual fund, ETFs don't necessarily perform better than mutual funds or vice versa. It's going to really depend upon individual funds and what they're invested in, how their investments have panned out, and how the market has done. One thing I will say is that ETFs have become much more popular over the past 20 years. And the reasons for that is that because they generally have lower fees than managed mutual funds. And many of the ETFs just track the stock market indices like the S&P 500. And so the S&P 500 is one that has done quite well. So you have to really look at the funds you're interested in investing in. Just because one is an ETF doesn't make it better than a mutual fund or vice versa. You have to look at how the individual funds have performed. But again, as to how do they compare, ETFs have become much more popular, and they typically have lower fees than mutual funds, but not in all cases. So you have to just do your research and make comparisons.
So this person had a follow-up question to that. What is considered a good fee? And I think something we don't usually talk about is even the range of fees. And maybe you have this knowledge, but I don't.
Yeah, I mean, so I'd say it's hard to say anything is a good fee, right? Because all fees are not great. You don't want fees, but all investments have them because it's the way the firms behind them are making money. And so you really should, this is where doing research, if you have a couple of funds or ETFs in mind, look them up and compare what their fees are. So, I mean, typically, again, very generally, fund fees that are around 1% are probably considered on the high side. And then there are index ETFs and index mutual funds that, might be, less than a quarter percentage point in many cases. So you have to just sort of do your research and ask questions.
Thank you, Alan. I also think the compound interest calculator on investor.gov can help you compare fees and how they may impact your returns, right, Alan? Does it have that feature on it?
It allows you to basically say how much you want to save by a certain date, and then it will tell you how much you have to save each month or each year.
Okay. So it's a little simpler than I was thinking it was.
Yeah. I mean, it probably can do what you said as well, but it's a really good way to sort of help your forecasting.
The other question we have is not directly related to wealth building, but I think I'm going to go ahead and answer it since it's here. So we have a question: how can I build a credit score being an international student with no loans or debt? So credit scores, there are hundreds of them for each person. And credit is a very complicated topic, particularly in the United States. So we're doing a credit webinar in December, a month from now. So I would encourage you to sign up for that. But you can establish credit in the United States as a foreign national if you get like a credit card that reports to the credit bureaus. There are secured credit cards that limit the risk to the vendor that you might be able to look into. This is also a good option for people just starting out credit when they're not an international student. If you don't have a social security number in the United States, it may be very challenging for you to get credit. There are also a lot of laws related to credit and your access to credit. So if you're under a certain age, if you're under 21, if you do not have proof of income to repay any debts, it will be very challenging for you to be able to establish credit or get a credit card. Credit scores are built on-time payment history. So unless you are repaying some type of debt or you are repaying a lease, for example, some leases will actually report to the credit bureaus. Those are different ways to also establish credit. You can piggyback off of somebody who already has credit if they are willing to make you a credit card holder. And so some of their on-time payment history can be given to you if you're listed as a credit card holder under their account. All right. Somebody asked, you mentioned paying down high interest credit cards is a good step before investment. Should we consolidate that in a personal loan with a lower rate? Okay, so that's more of a personal question. You've been getting some mail about this, but they seem like scams. They might be scams, so you're not sure about whether or not to take that option. So credit cards can be very high interest. If you do a consolidation loan, a personal consolidation loan for that, there are certain risks that are involved with that. And depending on what your credit worthiness is, you may not be saving a whole bunch on interest. So it would depend on all kinds of different factors that are going on with your debt and credit situation. I think it's a little bit too complicated for me to answer succinctly, but when you are thinking about credit cards in general, there are lots of ways that lenders will try to get you to juggle around your debt in order to pay different lenders. So think of it as like someone trying to steal your business or take your business to them, and like what is the benefit to you? but that's a good question that we may be able to answer better in our December webinar. Alan, did we talk about I know we talked about credit card interest being high if it's like 18%. Did we talk in general about what high interest is typically considered?
I mean, what level of interest rate is considered high interest?
Yeah,
We
yeah. So
didn't- I did not talk about that.
okay. Usually when we talk about high interest credit rates, we're basing it on what a 30-year mortgage is. So I think, Richard, can you look up what the 30-year average mortgage rate is right now?
I'm gonna guess, Andrea, and say it's somewhere probably around 7%.
Yeah, that's what I was going to guess.
Go ahead.
So if you have any interest or any debt that's bearing interest more than 7%, that's typically considered a high interest debt. But everyone's situation is different, and what they're eligible for as far as other interest rates can differ as well. So it's very complicated. Every situation is very complicated, which is why we do these webinars.
I think it's around 6.99% to around 7%.
Yeah, okay. So that makes like most federal loans are just under that for student loans. Most federal student loans are around 6.5% right now. So that would be a low interest type of debt. All right, so hopefully that has helped a few people. If you do think of questions later, you can always email studentmoney@uillinois.edu and we can try to answer your question or at least give you some educational information on what to consider in order to answer that question for yourself. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up our recording for today, but we will send it out once it's available and captioned on YouTube.